inspired I am for being a part of this 250th celebration of our Navy. Lessons learned during our service and becoming family on ourselves, but on the generations we must carry this forward. May God bless our warriors, our families, and may God bless the United States of America. We started off with about 200 total, and then we graduated 21 at the end of 6 months. So Hell Week, I think we probably had 40 or so. Then you have people get rolled from getting injured or injured during Hell Week. Then you have people, second phase of training. You have Hell Week in the first 2 months, and then you have your dive phase in the second 2 months. You have pool comp, which is almost more terrifying than Hell Week. To me, purpose needs to be impactful, and that is what I found out. So when I just recap that story, when I got out, it was a 2-day class that anybody in the military went through, where they just helped you look at your resume. They told you what kind of suit to wear. You practiced a couple of interview questions, and then they were like, "You're going to do great," and they sent you on your way. Back in the 90s when I was growing up, we didn't really have internet. You didn't have the movies and the input, media input for Navy SEALs, so you really didn't know about them. But I always had a desire to serve.
Okay. What's up, everybody? This is Simon. On this episode of the Ideal Hour, I have another Navy SEAL, a special one here, Chris Wyllie. He is not only a former Navy SEAL or a Navy SEAL. I don't think you could say they're former, to be honest with you. But he's also an entrepreneur. He's working currently as an executive director at the Michael P. Murphy Museum, which is a Navy SEAL preserving legacy for Naval Special Warfare. Chris, thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time. And obviously, thank you for supporting our country and representing our country during your time as a Navy SEAL.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. It's a pleasure to be on with you today.
So I've had several Navy SEALs on. We briefly talked about Craig Salman Sawyer, who's also in his own entrepreneurial right with fighting child trafficking and running that business. And I think it's very important. That podcast went on about 2 hours, and it uncovered some very interesting things where the government may be involved in child trafficking, which is kind of crazy. Shocking to me, and that was kind of his hint or stance. Give me a little bit about you as a Navy SEAL. Why did you want to become one? Let's start there.
Well, it was, just growing up, I had a whole family that had military service in the past. Back in the 90s when I was growing up, we didn't really have internet. You didn't have the movies and the input, media input for Navy SEALs, so you really didn't know about them. But I always had a desire to serve. So it was something bigger than myself, and wanting to, do something in that realm of serving others. So once I got through high school, I dabbled in college a little bit, and then realized, okay, I'm going to blink and I'll be 30. That terrifying thought, back when you're young, going, oh my God, I can't even imagine being 30 and still in the same town. So, that hit me one day driving, and I said, I got to get out of here. So started researching what kind of position that I would be proud of. Because I could have went to college. I had a high school sweetheart that was my first wife. Let's go there. But I had a high school sweetheart back in the day at that time that, if I went away to college, we were going to break up. All of those things where you're young, you just don't know yourself. Things that make you who you are now, those experiences. But I could have went to 𝐒𝐡𝐞 College and wrestled and did all these things, but instead I stayed home and did some community college and then realized, okay, I got to get a change. I really want to get into the service. So started researching special forces because if I wasn't going to go away, I needed something to make myself feel proud of and to also, allow my parents to have that idea in their head that I didn't go to college. So I came across a book. It was Brave Men, Dark Waters. And it was the history of the Navy SEALs, the UDTs, from World War II frogmen into Vietnam. And what really, I guess, resonated with me was the black ops, the clandestine, nobody knew who you were, where you were. When you were home, you didn't tell anybody what you did. That was what really turned me on to, pursuing becoming a Navy SEAL. So, went into the military and went from there. I had a very interesting way of getting through and into SEAL training, but that was, to sum it up from the question, that's kind of how it started, was, researching, trying to find something that would make me proud, knowing I wanted to go into the military, not understanding the military and all the different branches, because we just didn't have the information that we do today.
Everybody seems to have almost a unique trajectory in becoming a Navy SEAL, like failures, trying it again, and kind of not qualifying through whatever Hell Week or any of the type of training, or even the mental aspect of it. They're not ready, maybe. Was your trajectory one and done, where you just kind of, they selected you, you auditioned, so to speak, went through Hell Week and survived, or did you have to also climb the ladder a few times?
Oh, absolutely not. Wasn't the one and done, straightforward, process. So, just starting at boot camp, they pretty much told you, hey, the recruiter said, hey, you raise your hand, go into boot camp, and it's a voluntary service. So you can't make somebody be a Navy SEAL. You have to want it. You have to desire. You have to have that coming from inside of you, because if you send somebody there that really didn't have it, the heart for it, you wouldn't make it a couple of days into training. So totally voluntary. So when I went to boot camp, raised my hand. Navy boot camp is not hard, but it's 8 weeks long. And 8 weeks in a row, I went and failed every single time at that test. So didn't have the information. The recruiter didn't really have the information for me, and put me in an advanced electronics job. So, back then you needed a job to just go into the Navy, and then being a SEAL was voluntary. Nowadays, you can go in and have a contract to go directly to try out for the SEALs. But when I was going through this, I'm in advanced electronics, Tomahawk cruise missiles, a job that you can't really get out of. But what I learned going into the military and failing during those tests, and I'm failing in front of somebody I'm aspiring to become. I'm failing in front of a Navy SEAL that's running this test. And, granted, at the moment, I didn't understand my actions and what I was doing, how it looked. I just knew I wanted to be a SEAL. So every single week I went and failed in front of this guy. And when I went to graduate boot camp and go to school, he said, don't come back. He goes, don't come back for a couple of months, go to the gym. I was failing on the pull-ups. He's like, go to the gym, go to a pull-down machine and practice strict pull-downs. And he goes, and then come back and I promise you'll pass. And I was like, no, I really want to come back next week. And he looks at me and he goes, every other person came here, failed once, and I never saw them again. He's like, you've been here every single week for 8 weeks failing. He goes, I understand how much you want this. And he went to bat for me. He got me released. He had a fight, a whole, big story about that, getting me out of being a fire controlman, missile guidance systems and things of that nature. Then I went to SEAL training, and I got into SEAL training. I was in class 200 with Ray Kerr and Jason Redman and a couple other well-known guys, great friends to this day. And had a couple other friends that I was close with in training, and got into Hell Week. And I watched these people that I looked up to and thought were invincible, doing the obstacle course in 5 minutes and running 5-minute miles in the sand. These things that I couldn't do at that time. They wind up quitting. And I got that, question in my head of, hey, if they can't do it, and these are, again, people that I looked up to and measured myself, which I shouldn't, nobody should ever measure themselves against somebody else. But at that time of my life and my maturity level, I was about 19, 20 years old at the time. That's what I was doing. I looked at these people as better than me, as, stronger than me. And they wind up quitting, and then there I am right behind them, probably a half hour, hour later. I'm like, if they can't do it, I can't do it. So I wind up quitting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And next morning I got dressed, went right up to first phase and said, hey, I made a tremendous mistake. And I said, put me back in, roll, not to the same class, but just, let me start over. And, and I knew that it didn't work that way. You're supposed to go out to the fleet for a couple of years and come back. My luck was that I guess I made somewhat of an impression that I didn't know of. They brought me up to the command master chief, and I'm like an E4 at the time. This is a Navy SEAL command master chief. The most terrifying person in the world.
Yeah.
And I said, stood in front of him, and said, hey, I made a mistake. I want to get back in training. And he looked at me and said, yes, you made a mistake. The first phase guys that run, first phase and Hell Week and that said, yeah, you made a mistake. And he said, I'm not going to send you to the fleet. He goes, I can't put you back in. He goes, but we need guys over at the special boat teams. And, we're going to send you over to SWCC. And that's a special warfare combatant crew member school. And I never even heard of that. Had no idea what that was. So they send me over to SWCC, and he said, look, go to SWCC. You get through SWCC, you do your 2 years there instead of going out to the fleet, you have an open invitation to come back. I said, okay, 𝐒𝐢𝐦𝐬, I'll do that. Went over to SWCC, I did class 16. And if I did not want to be a Navy SEAL so badly, and if I didn't quit and hate myself, like I woke up every morning, and in the military, you have to shave every morning. You have to, put your uniform on, that type of stuff. I had to look at myself every single morning for 2 years and, say you're a quitter. And, because it just wasn't what I wanted. Right. So I went through SWCC, and like I was saying, if I didn't want to be a SEAL, SWCC would have been the best job in the Navy.
It would have been the best job?
Yeah, it would have been the best job in the Navy. High-speed boats, you're driving the SEALs, you're jumping out of planes, you're shooting guns, you're doing all the same stuff. You just don't get off the boat.
You don't get off the boat.
Yeah, you're not climbing up ladders into ships. You're not, swimming in at night. You're not doing all this extra stuff. But
it's still important. I mean, they got to get back on the boat.
Yeah, super important, super cool, super fun job. But like I said, it was great. 2 years. I deployed. I went to Iraq with the SEAL team. We did ship takedowns in the Persian Gulf. We did, I'm driving these boats for the guys. It was really cool. But I just had that lingering, wound. Let's say that. It was just an open wound that had to heal. I had to prove to myself that, I made a mistake. I can do this. So 2 years, 11 months, and however many days I put my package in, and I was back, wound up being class leader, honor man in SEAL tactical training, everything was going great. Graduated, got to SEAL Team 2, was working up for deployment, and then wound up pretty much breaking my neck. I have all C4 through C7s all plated.
Wow.
Yeah, just training. Training stuff, and between the skydiving, a lot of people are saying that it was probably due to the whiplash from the boats for 2 years. Who knows? It just was. We were home practicing, and something really erroneous blew out my neck. So wasn't an actual bad incident. So that's my quick little recap of.
So you broke it, and then what happened? Did that delay you, or did you have to pause the whole Iraq tour, or
with what? I'm sorry,
your neck.
Oh no, that was once I got through the whole thing with Iraq and everything, and then went to SEAL training, got through that, went to SEAL Team 2, and we were working up to deploy This is pre 9/11, working up to deploy. We would have been deployed to Germany. So I'm like just getting ready to leave. And that's when my neck went out. And,
oh my God.
Yeah. So it was about 7 years in the whole special forces realm. And, did not want to get out. And that's what was difficult, where, transitioning out of the military especially when you didn't plan on it, you didn't want to, and you're hurt, so that was a really low part, of doing that, and then September 11th happens, and God knows nobody saw that coming.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Tried to get back in afterwards, but, it was a broken toy. I couldn't play.
Yeah. And I assume just like sports and professional sports, because a SEAL is a professional soldier, like to the highest level, or one of the highest levels out there. There's obviously Delta and all these other, Army Rangers. But do the SEALs say, hey, you're approaching like this age, time to wind down, they're not really interested in deploying, say, older gentlemen like yourselves, or even at a certain age where they feel like an age can hinder the chances of the team to be successful?
I don't think it's an age per se. I think it is a performance and experience level. So you'll have guys that are, I want to say in their 30s into their 40s, where they're still kicking indoors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it would be, if your body's held up for it, just like, like you said, like a professional athlete, you're putting yourself through extreme training and preparation to then put yourself through extreme circumstances, in that moment, especially in battle and things of that nature. So as long as your body holds up and your mind holds up and you're able to, be an effective SEAL, these guys, they would utilize you. You're an asset. As you're getting older, also as you increase in rank, then they're going to look at you as a more instructional or passing down the knowledge to the younger guys. So you could be an older SEAL still, physically active and going on missions. But you may not be kicking in a door, especially an officer like 𝐒𝐡𝐞, like those guys get to a certain level. And then now, like when 𝐒𝐡𝐞 was over in Ramadi and stuff, he's not physically kicking in the door. He's back overseeing all of this stuff. He's orchestrating, he's making command level decisions, much higher, stress level, different stress level, but, and responsibility. But, as you're moving, your job could evolve.
And that's a very important job as well. So he's kind of the manager of the operation, where, the stress level you're probably referring to, I would assume, is he's responsible for the lives and the success of the mission of his people that are brothers in his mind.
Absolutely.
What was the toughest part? Now, Jimmy Watson came on, Craig Salmon, Sawyer, we mentioned. I think there was another one or two. I forget the names. If I apologize. But what was the toughest part for you in the training in Hell Week, or any of the periods of you getting to become a SEAL?
Toughest part, huh? That would probably be just trying to, be it's a difficult way of going through SEAL training, where you want to be friends with everybody and you want to be close to people and things of that nature. And from my first experience of being so close to people and looking up to those people and having that, kind of sway me in my own, thoughts, it was difficult to be class leader, where I had to, count and know everybody, where they were, all of those different, moments of Hell Week, when everyone else is kind of just checked out, running around as a zombie. I had to know a full head count, where people were, who was there, and that was constantly changing and had different stressors. So Hell Week might not have been as bad as it could have been for other people, because my mind was more focused on trying to remember, you know, the
team
stuff. You know, I had to account for, you know, 100 and something people all the way down to, you know, whoever was left after Hell Week, you know, so.
Yeah. And how many were left in your experience after, say, you had 100 or so on the audition part of it?
Well, we started off with about 200 total, and then we graduated 21 at the end of 6 months. So Hell Week, I think we probably had 40 or so. Then you have people get rolled from getting injured or injured during Hell Week. Then you have people, you know, second phase of training. You know, you have Hell Week in the first 2 months, and then you have your dive phase in the second 2 months. You have pool comp, which is almost more terrifying than Hell Week, where you're underwater and they're ripping your regulators out and tying knots in your air, and you can't come to the surface. You have to figure it out, or pretty much pass out. And you're underwater for about 20 minutes with the instructors, like, you know, like sharks attacking you underwater. And a lot of people fail that, you know, so a lot of people either get rolled out of your class or even get kicked out of training, you know, from failing, you know, so there's multiple.
That's scary.
Yeah, no, that, like, people always say Hell Week. There's other times during training where you're tested, you know, where you're questioning yourself, you know, because you weren't experienced. You've never experienced anything like that. In Hell Week, you're not underwater like that, you know. And as SEALs, you're underwater. You know, we're coming from the water is where our history is, you know. But during training, I would say it was probably the second phase with dive phase was probably more of the harder times for me, you know, with the underwater, sharing your air, having to shut things off, and you don't know when that air is coming back mentally. It's a little more.
So do they shut off the air? I mean, I got my scuba diving license now. I'm no Navy SEAL. In fact, I have a funny story for you. I thought I was going to die, but do they shut off your air just to mess with you during this training, or do they tangle it and when you're underwater?
So instead of, you know how with your scuba diving they have a hard hose that comes to your regulator in the front. So the regulator part that's in the front in your mouth is actually behind your head. And then they have a soft corrugated, almost looks like a vacuum hose, stretchy, that comes around and goes into your mouth. So they're able to turn off the valve, and then they'll take that rubbery hose, rip it over your head, and tie it in a knot. You don't have a mask on. You've now been tumbled around. And now you have to take off everything, you know, and you have no idea when you took that breath, when they come and hit you, you know, so you could have exhaled, went to inhale, and they turned everything off and did this. Now you're trying to hold your breath, kind of confused underwater because you really can't see clearly. And then you have to try to untie this like rubbery hose that they like physically tied a huge knot in. So yeah, they're messing with you. They're trying to make you fail, you know, and that's the whole game of it. You know, you're not supposed to pass. They want to see how you react in those situations when you're pushed to that extreme, or, you know, what happens? What do you do when you fail? Do you come back twice as hard, or do you give up? You know, or do you, you know, like become?
Are you quitting, or are you moving on? Let me ask you, Chris. During this process, obviously they're testing your mind and your mental capability, whether you're quitting and you regret it, which is something you really mentioned earlier on in your podcast, where I think it ate you alive that night to the point where you faced the chief, and you faced the chief, and, you know, that was one of the biggest regrets that actually overturned for you. What the people that have succeeded through these stages of training, whether it's Hell Week or underwater training, what's their mentality like mentally? How strong are they, or what do they share as a common characteristic that you saw that you're like, you know what, this guy's strong enough to overcome this?
In training, or once you get through everything?
What in training, like before quitting, or even if they quit and they come back, like what are the characteristics of this person's mind or soul or their aura that really separates them, maybe aside from luck, from injuries, from the 200 to the 20? What separates them? What do you think they have in their mind that maybe, aside from the luck of injuries, that the others don't?
Well, I honestly believe, just from, being a SEAL and now, being in the community for so long, it is the people that have overcome or persevered in some aspect of their life. Maybe they lost their parents. Maybe they were just the runt of the litter. Maybe, they were bullied or something, that has challenged them. It may not be a something you could see per se, right? But it's something internal that has challenged them and put them into this mindset that they had to get through something, right? They had to, push themselves when, other people may have quit, So a lot of times I explain to people, like, when you first start SEAL training and you're all sizing each other up, right? You got a couple of weeks before it starts and you're kind of, you're on Coronado Island in California. Nice, you're on the beach, you're in shorts, and you're young men in shape, right? So everybody's shirts off, working out, and you're looking at each other, and like anybody would do, you're sizing each other up. So you're thinking, hey, this guy's going to be SEAL, that guy is going to make it, this guy's going to make it. And it's usually those people that are the college athletes, the guys that would be on the cover of Men's Fitness. Those are the guys that quit first. Because everything is coming so easy for them. They're super athletic. So anything sports or athletic wise is not a challenge. But, the guy that's, I'm not built for running. I can run through a wall. I'm not built for distance, right? You don't put me in soft sand and expect me to run fast. It's not, I'm not built that way. Swimming, I did really well swimming. I always was first coming out of the water with my swim buddy. But running, I just got my butt kicked.
Wasn't you?
It wasn't me.
I hate running.
The person that runs, even though it hurts every step and you're going to throw up at the end, and you push yourself constantly to go to that extreme to get through this. So it's funny, if I can tell you a quick story that one of the guys told me in training, right? They had a kid that showed up that wanted to be a SEAL, and they said, okay, you got to swim across the pool. And I don't know if you heard this, but you got to swim across the pool. And the kid goes, okay. He sinks to the bottom of the pool and walks across the pool, and they pull him up from the other side, and the kid's like almost going to drown and die. And they looked at him and they're yelling at him like, what the hell are you doing? And he goes, I can't swim. So, but think of the mindset that person had on how bad they wanted to be a SEAL. Most people that can't swim are terrified of water. Right?
They're not jumping in.
They're not jumping in. They're terrified they're going to drown. And this person jumped into something that they're terrified to do, walked across the pool because they had to get across. That's what they were told to do, and come out and almost die. And the instructors were like, well, we can teach you to swim. We can't, we can't teach somebody to be like that. That's the difference. The mind of that drive, that internal voice that's saying you can still do this. You can't teach somebody that.
There was no quit in that guy.
There is no quit in that guy. And that's what's hard. So did that kid become a Navy SEAL? I don't know. I think so, but I'm not sure. I just know that part of the story, and I think it's just an amazing example of mindset where people think failure is a bad thing. Failure is your first attempt of something, and it's how you do when you fail. That's the whole part of never quitting.
I wanted to share with you briefly, because it's about you, this podcast, not about me. But when I told you I got my scuba diving license, I didn't know really how to swim either. So in high school, I got a doctor's note to not pass that swim test that's required. But then I went on YouTube and I learned how to swim off YouTube, so that I passed that swimming test off YouTube. And then when my wife and I went on vacation to Parrot Cay to scuba dive, I got delirious underwater, it was 40 feet and so forth. And I had to pull somebody around the boat as part of training, which was like super tough. Anyway, they thought I had decompression poisoning, so they took me to the hospital because I threw up from the seasickness. I wasn't used to it. Luckily, it wasn't that. But anyway, I see that mindset. I was terrified to go into that pool that day trying to learn how to swim off YouTube. It was kind of funny.
But that's determination, man. You still went in the water. You still did that stuff at the same time. You know, it's
so,
pretty.
So you're saying, Chris, I could have been a Navy SEAL.
Dude, listen. I honestly, you know, you need to be physically ready for it too. But you know, mentally, it's mostly mental. You know, if you met, you know, and you've met a few of the guys, but, you know, a lot of people have a different, you know, perception of what a SEAL is. And I have friends that are SEALs that are 4'11", 5 foot, you know, they're not these big Adonis looking guys. They're like normal people. You know, I have friends that are literally like 5'10" and 120 pounds wet. Like they look like little stick figures. And you're like, that's not in your mind or on TV what you think this guy would, you know, this SEAL is going to be. But they have that innate ability to never quit, and they have that drive that you're talking about, you know. So it's pretty wild watching it happen, and now, you know, being older, getting to watch these kids get through it, you know. So I meet them before they even go, speak to them. You know, and you kind of have a feeling in your gut if you think the guy's going to make it or not. And then watching them make it through and seeing them grow as a man and make, you know, go through that big challenge. It's pretty wild to watch.
It's rewarding. I would imagine now the SEALs have so much data and analytics versus before, you know, with technology and the timing of everything, that it makes maybe even the selection process or even the process of going through training even that much more distinct. Would you say that's accurate, or it's still you have to get to the finish line kind of old school?
Well, I believe you're correct, but there's such a difference from when I went through training to present day, with the amount of data that they collect on the guys, and the end result is different too. You know, when we went through, and a lot of the guys that have been on your podcast have gone through, when we would go to train, even as a SEAL, we didn't have the things that these guys have today, you know. So like night vision for me, when it came out, was one little thing, you know, and we were like, oh my God, you could see at night. Like, it was cool. And, you know, but it was this big, heavy, cumbersome thing. You had no depth perception. Now these guys have like 180-degree field of view. They can see all this stuff.
Like a computer.
Yeah, it's like a computer, you know, so the end result has to be different, right? Mm-hmm. You know, so the basic training of SEAL training, that core 6 months, I don't think really changed that much, because I think you need to put people through that physicality and mental challenge the same way. I don't think you could make it more advanced or more technologically advanced. I think the suck has to suck, right? You can't really change, right? So I think it has to be that physicality part. And then once they get through that initial selection of the 6 months where you kind of do your Hell Week, your dive phase, your land warfare, and that was that normal buds part. Then you get into SEAL qualifying, which is another 9 months. That, I think, is gone, you know, totally different than where you know, myself and some of these other guys, you know, had experience in our time, you know, which is great, because you need the new technology. You need the new, you know, weapon systems. You need all of these things at your disposal, because everything's moving so fast, you know. So I went.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I
was just saying, I went to the new SEAL facility in California, which is like I think it's like $1.5 billion facility now. And these guys have every state of the art. They have physical, you know, like NFL physicians and coaches there. Mm-hmm. They get meal plans. They get full body, you know, metrics and scans and programs for working out. They get monitored. They're like super soldiers right now, and I'm jealous. I would have signed right back up. I I was laughing. I'm like, where can I sign? Like, this is
let me back in.
Yeah, like,
this neck's been feeling better for a few years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like kind of put the plates in it. You can't break it now. So.
Oh, good. Wow. Yeah. So you had a surgery. That's crazy.
Oh yeah.
Let me ask you. There's obviously this brotherhood of Navy SEALs, this camaraderie. But before you become a Navy SEAL, it's also like a competition. So you kind of have to work with other people during that training or that qualifying period. Is it very competitive where you can't trust the next guy next to you, or they still want you to trust this person that's trying to take your position? Do you know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying. I think you have a lot. I think everybody that's there has an alpha mindset. Okay. So I believe everybody's there. It wants to be the best, wants to excel. We have a saying, pays to be a winner. Everybody wants to be the winner. I personally didn't see people like trying to sabotage each other, because what would happen in a quick example would, you've seen the pictures of the guys running with boats on their heads. There's 7 people boat crews, and then you'd have, or log PT. You always had like a crew of 7. All of that's kind of height order, right? So when you start off with 100 and something, 200 people, there's a bunch of boat crews. As people quit, you get pushed around into different boat crews, and it may only be for a day or two until they can line everybody up and reevaluate. But the person you're trying to undermine or be a jerk to may be the guy that is holding up the boat with you at one point in your life, right? So I never really experienced people trying to be that undermining, right? But you definitely have people that were, you're trying to beat each other. You're
to be the bigger alpha.
Oh my God, yeah, everything. Even at the SEAL teams, I'll give you a perfect example of this. Even at the SEAL teams, we would go out and you worked really hard, you partied harder, right? Mm-hmm. So we would go out, we would work out for an hour and a half every morning, and then do our work, especially when you were home, not deployed, not getting ready to deploy, but you in between deployments, you kind of have like a go to school, do this. So you always worked out in the morning at the team, and then you would, do your stuff around the team. And, you had Tuesday swim, Wednesday course, this type of stuff, right? So Thursday or Friday was a 10-mile run. And we would always go out Thursday night drinking. And then Friday, you'd get up in the morning and you'd have the whole team get off a bus at the park, and you had to do this 10-mile run. Well, it was always, it's a completion. And we'd all start off running and talking, and then all of a sudden somebody would get a little, in front of everyone else. And then the next person would get in front of him. And then all of a sudden by mile 3, it was an all out sprint, because somebody had to win, even though it was told that it was just a group run. No, everybody, people were throwing up off the trail. Like it turned into an all out competition, and it's the mentality of us. That's what it is. It's the mentality of you have to be the best. You have to show everybody you're the best. And even when it's not a competition, it's a competition. That's kind of what life is too. Everyone, says life's, you're competing against everybody else.
You really are. In jobs and in schools and with kids, as parents, it's crazy. Think of it this way. You mentioned earlier in the podcast about, your high school sweetheart and your first marriage. Did becoming a Navy SEAL, and this is more personal, of course, but becoming a Navy SEAL, does that have some type of effect on the family? Maybe you're not around as much, because you're literally dedicating yourself to another family, like a brotherhood. Very similar, I've seen when I've discussed outlaw motorcycle clubs or something, where it's like you're secretive in this way. And you mentioned you were at this stage where you come home, you can't really talk about certain things, certain missions, whatever. Does that have an effect on relationships? Is it something where you delay your personal life?
Well, if you're younger going in and wanting to be a SEAL, I would definitely tell you, do not get married. It takes a very special woman, or partner, that will be able to stay with you. Okay, so it's a very selective thing. Or I think our divorce rate's almost as high as our quit rate. So I think we're 85% people don't make it through training, or 90%. We're up there with divorce rate, and it's because you start a family, you have your kids, and you can't tell them where you're going. You're never home, even when you're getting ready to deploy. You're constantly gone. So you may be gone 10 months out of the year before you deploy. And, 2 weeks here, you're home for a day, 3 weeks there, you're home for a weekend, and it weighs on the family, because you need a woman, or like I said, a partner that's going to be able to say, okay, I'm kind of on my own. And I kind of understand that you're never going to tell me where you are. And I just have to believe and trust in you. Right? That doesn't sound like
sound like a woman
relationship.
Is there a woman that exists like this? I don't know.
No, I mean, really, I know a bunch of guys that have got 20, 30-year careers that were married the whole time. And those women are rock solid, badasses, is what I would say. Because you got to look at it. You got to look at it as they did it themselves. They raised a family. They take care of the house. They took care of, something went wrong in the house. They're dealing with contractors. They're doing all this stuff so you could be a SEAL, right? So it's a really tremendous relationship, between the two. You're doing a super hard thing and they're doing a super hard thing, and you both have to understand that. So yeah, it definitely.
I would say that might actually be a tougher mission than the actual Navy SEAL mission. Dealing with kids, contractors, school bills, this, that. That's not easy stuff.
But what's nice about it is that if you are, in the SEAL community as a spouse, there's a tremendous infrastructure of other spouses and people on base, and people help each other with the kids. And there's a tremendous community for that, and then, like what we have our brotherhood of perfect examples. I would be gone for, a few weeks or months, come home. I'm with my, wife at the time. And all of a sudden I haven't seen her in months, home for that first night. All of a sudden, one of the single guys calls me, "Hey, I'm in trouble. I'm at the bar." There I look at my wife and I go, "Sorry, I got to leave." And she's like, "What do you mean? You just got home? We're alone." You know what I'm implying, and I'm like, gotta go. I gotta go help them. And it just, that was the way it had to be, though. You're trusting these people with your life. And if they needed you at a moment's notice, we knew that each one of us would, be there. So
are there any good bar stories you want to share, Chris, where a Navy SEAL gets into it and the other guy doesn't know what the heck's happening?
Well, that's why, I really enjoyed back in the day where it was quiet, professional. You never spoke about what you did. We would travel and have made up jobs. So a quick, funny, story is that we would go down to Arkansas to Fort Smith, which was a big old Army base, and we would do land warfare and rocket launching, and there's tens of thousands of acres to do stuff, right? And like anything, you'd want to go out and have fun. So we found like one of the local honky tonk bars, and I'm from New York, so I picked the job that I'm going to be a rodeo clown. That's what I'm going to tell people. I'm a rodeo clown. Now, did I go any further in researching that job? No. I should have done a little research, came up with some, circuits, or had some lingo or anything like that. So we're out drinking, and, a girl comes up, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" Because granted, we're new in town. There's not a lot of new people, And so we're, talking, and why are you in town? I said, "Well, I'm a rodeo clown." So I'm thinking it's going to be a funny, kind of like interaction. I can joke around, lie about it. And within a second, she looks at me and goes, "Hold on a second. I got to go get my friend." So all of a sudden she jumps up, walks over, grabs this guy, and the guy comes over, and she goes, "Hey, this is my friend. He's a rodeo clown."
What are the chances?
Now I'm like, man, now this is blowing up in my face. So he's like, what circuit where are you going? He's like all excited. And I said, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not a rodeo clown. And he's what do you really do? And so I whispered to him what we're doing. He goes, well, why didn't you say that? He's like, that's so much cooler. Like, you don't say that in a bar because then you have somebody wanting to challenge you, or because people are drinking and things. And then I also said, I personally, even to this day, think rodeo clowns are badasses. You're running around, jumping in front of bulls that save people. You guys are crazy. So we wound up having a blast and drinking all night. But it was just one of those things that I always liked like I said in the beginning, that the black ops part of it, where nobody knew what you did. It was quiet, professional, because of that. And they tell you that, you say you're a Navy SEAL and you're in a bar, you're going to have some drunk idiot, want to challenge you for some reason.
It's like these idiots that challenge like UFC fighters on social media that get knocked out, and like some random YouTuber or something going, I can beat you up. And it's like,
you don't understand what you're doing, and it's kind of silly. And then worst case, both people get hurt, or nowadays you get arrested. It's back in the day you could have a fight and bouncers threw you out, you went home.
If a Navy SEAL got arrested and did get in a bar fight, I would imagine they're on some type of superiority with the police to be kind of released, or more leniency, or do they still go through the justice system just like everybody else?
You can still go through the justice system. It depends on how bad of a thing you did, where, because if you're just off base, things of that nature, or if you could get your command involved earlier, before you get in trouble, like in the midst of it, where police are standing there, if you can have your command, because there's always guys on duty that are sitting at the command, so they could come.
I see.
And try to
come save you.
Kind of, say, hey,
your rodeo story doesn't pan out. This guy gets offended. The command comes in.
Well, that could happen. You could get the command to come and try to help you. Or say, hey, we'll deal with him. We'll punish him, and they'll bring you back to base. That type of stuff. So that could happen. But nowadays, you go out, you get into a fight, you hurt somebody, you're getting the book thrown at you. That's the problem with how it is nowadays. There's really you
can't push anybody anymore. You're going to get sued. This is not, and it's not like how I grew up either. So, which is kind of interesting. I grew up in Russia where kids could fight each other and it would, it'd be okay. And then, you just sit. Like the parents are suing now. Now parents are signing waivers to use the pool at a house at where we're from. It's just,
No, it's amazing. I grew up the same way. You would go out, the only thing my father told me was that you don't start a fight.
Yeah.
He goes, you have my permission to finish one, but he goes, I don't want to ever hear you starting a fight, because then you deserve to get your butt kicked. But we would go out, and that's how you dealt with stuff back in the day. You had a problem with somebody, either you spoke about it, or you went out and fought, and then the next day you were either friends or you just stayed away from each other.
Yeah, usually you're friends. You become even closer friends. It's just
that's what's funny about men, man. I think it's hilarious. I have a guy that was one of my first fights when I was 12 or 13. He was bigger than me, and we went out and beat the crap out of each other in front of the entire school. After school, I broke my hand. He broke his hand, and we beat each other up. The next day we came back in, were kind of like nervous because you didn't know if you're going to start fighting again. And then by the second day, we were friends, and we talk to each other to this day. It's
wow, that's
funny.
Incredible. Tell me a little bit about the Brotherhood of Navy SEALs. Is it a lifelong kind of thing where you have so many friends because you've gone through such experiences? Do some friendships fall off, or you're always kind of keeping in tabs with everybody?
Well, it's a little bit of both. You're kind of like right when I got out, I made the poor choice of alienating myself because I was mentally dealing with trying to get out and figure out who I was, find a purpose, all of these things when I didn't want to get out. So I had a problem of comparing myself again, trying to hey, I'm not a SEAL anymore. These guys are actually out there doing stuff. So I alienated myself for a long time, and that was not mentally healthy for me. Did not understand that, right? So it took me a long time to figure out, my own stuff, right, mentally. But when I did, which was probably only 6-7 years ago, where I realized that helping other veterans and helping other people in general was therapeutic to myself and putting me around like-minded individuals, a veteran. So like a veteran, we don't have to be Navy SEALs, right? You're a person that served, you put your hand up, you pretty much said, hey, I'll die for my country. And you went away for a while, right? So just having that type of experience together, I found that speaking or trying to help with, people was helpful for myself, right? Then I started getting back into the community. And once I got back into the community and just talking to the guys that I haven't seen in 15, 20 years, it was instantaneously back to like I never left. So it was all of a sudden I felt whole again. And I felt, I just felt like myself again, but I did that to myself by doing that. But to try to answer the question is that even though there was a huge hiatus of me not being around and speaking with them, it ultimately was just like we'd never, had a break. It was like we just, saw each other.
You guys rekindled right away. It's just
right away.
It's as if you never left. Well, that's great.
Yeah, so the brotherhood is very strong. Are there guys that when they get out are more self-focused, right? Where they're trying to promote themselves and trying to do things for themselves? Yes. So have I had a few people that I never really served with that I met that were SEALs that I found to be not a great fit as a friend? Yes. But that probably would have been the case,
anywhere
early. But yeah,
I would imagine that type of mindset is just a mindset in any type of business or sports team or anything where they're like, what's in it for me? And, you've mentioned something really interesting earlier, the transition from being a Navy SEAL to business or entrepreneurship, which you're an executive director at the Michael P. Murphy, and we're going to talk about that really quick here. But how once the boots are sort of off, is that a difficult thing for someone to go through to see like, who am I now if I'm no longer active SEAL? Like earlier I mentioned, once you're a SEAL, you're always a SEAL in my mind and probably many, but not an active SEAL. What does that feel like? And you mentioned you had to overcome some tough times yourself.
So it's think about going from, Formula One racing to where you're not even driving a go-kart. That's the kind of adrenaline, right? You're doing stuff daily that you could die even when you're practicing. So you go from that type of high level, high profile where people are looking up at you, especially in the military, to where you're, I'm not going to say nobody, but you're just one in a billion, right?
You're in the shadow.
You're in the shadow. So like I explicitly remember coming home after the service, going to 7-Eleven by us, like a Wawa kind of a thing, getting a cup of coffee, standing online, and someone coming and shoving past me while I'm standing online, and just everything in my body just to say, just let it go, because I'm like, literally got hit, and there wasn't a sorry, wasn't excuse me, it just was just like, screw you. And I just remember breathing and going, just let it go. And it just was so silly, So I went from SEAL to not being able to get a job where I was married with a 6-year-old, right? To then, going on job interview after job interview, we love what we see, we'll be in touch, nobody calling me back, needing a job because I have a wife and kids.
Sure.
So my mother, we had a mutual friend that worked at the power company, and they wound up getting me a job as a union welder, right? So I took the
great jobs, by the way. Welding is huge.
Yeah, so welding, great job, So I never worked in a union anything. So I didn't understand a union mentality where it's not SEAL mentality of, elite, get everything done, do all this stuff. It's more like, hey, we'll get the job done when it gets done. We'll do some overtime, and I'm not bashing union at all. It's a great, thing to protect the workers, and
it's a process.
It's a process, yeah, but it's not this high level performance job, right?
It's not first in.
No, it's not first in. You want to be last out. You want to get the most money if you're last out.
Yeah.
So I went from Navy SEAL to union welder as an apprentice. I get hired and they have a hiring freeze. So I'm the lowest in seniority man in the union. So for about 3.5 years, I was the coffee guy. Think of it that way. Mentally, think of it mentally. Went from Navy SEAL to going around and getting people's coffee orders, driving to the deli, getting coffee and egg sandwiches, coming back, getting lunch, going back. And that's what I did.
Well, being a lead in your position while you were a SEAL and managing 100 people.
But I was making money. And what was crazy to me as a SEAL back in the early, 2000, end of 2000, when I got hurt, was so being a SEAL at that time, being married with a kid, I was making $47,000 before taxes. Think of it that
to put your life on the line.
Right? Yeah. And then I go a few years later, once I get this union job, I'm making 80 grand with benefits and getting coffee. Yeah. I was like, I'll get coffee all day.
You're like, let this guy bump in front of me. I'm not risking this.
So in that 5-year period when I was in that job, one, I learned how to weld, X-ray welds, all these things. So I learned a great profession, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So I put myself through I finished my bachelor's in management and then got a master's in management. And then never went back one day. I woke up one day and said, hey, if I keep going in this job, I'm never going to go. I'm never going to change, because it's just, you're making money. You're just going through the motions. So never went back to this job. Just quit cold turkey. Didn't even call anybody. I started a company doing high-end audio video, installation. Yeah, so I started that company. I was doing it a little bit on the weekends while I was working because I enjoyed it. I love technology, and as that started picking up, I was still doing the union stuff. But then I was like, look, I have to make a choice, and I was divorced now. My girlfriend at the time said, you're miserable. She's like, well, now's the time, to do it if you're going to make a big change. So quit that job, and I started my audio video company. And that went really well for a long time. But, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm not sure if I finished answering your first question.
No. This is good. I mean, the point is the identity after it's
the like transition.
SEALs, the SEALs are, they have to have some type of work. And what I'm seeing is they're kind of building up their profiles now on social media, especially the younger ones.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. I would imagine the SEAL Foundation or even the Navy SEALs have more opportunities or jobs for veterans such as yourselves, or they could direct, or they should. I don't know if they have it or not. Maybe you could correct me. But once you come out, it's almost like a final curtain in a movie set. You're done. What do I do? Right? Like, where do I work? Do I not work?
It's finding that purpose again. That's what it is. Like I had a really big purpose or important purpose, and then trying to find your purpose in life where you're making an impact. So for me, purpose needs to be impactful, and that is what I found out. So when I just recap that story, when I got out, it was a 2-day class that anybody in the military went through, where they just helped you look at your resume. They told you what kind of suit to wear. You practiced a couple of interview questions, and then they were like, you're going to do great. And they sent you on your way. That was it. That was your transition. Nowadays, because they understood that, or they have a lot more input, like we've been talking about, that the veterans needed more mentorship.
Yeah, a little hand holding to transition.
Yeah. So now there are so many programs that are in place now to help veterans, special forces, SEALs, all these different groups to find their next purpose, their next chapter in life. And that's great. So that's part of when I started 6-7 years ago, getting back involved with the community, was doing charitable work where fundraising. So I like, I had to find something hard to do to challenge myself. So like the Hudson River swim, I do the Navy SEAL Hudson River swim every year. It's a 3.5-mile swim from New Jersey around.
You know what? I sponsored that. That's funny because I've had a New York Navy SEAL. I guess the NYPD has their own subdivision of underwater police officers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, they have a maritime, division.
They have. Yep. And a guest, Oscar, I forgot his last name, he came on and he's like, please sponsor us. And we did. And so you do that, the whole thing there with the swim as well. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. So we do this. I do the swim. I do, sometimes I do a 31-mile, march through DC for Extortion 17. But a lot of the stuff that I do to raise money goes to veteran, charities that are transitional assistance. So the Honor Foundation, they'll take guys and literally put them with Fortune 500 companies, and then they get this, I don't want to call it, it's like a paid internship. And you're kind of like, hey, we know you have the work ethic. We know you have the skill set, the drive, the mission focus.
Determination.
Finance. We can teach you, different things. So they can teach you the business side, but they can't teach the work ethic side. So they're pulling from a pool of really talented people that just need to be honed, right? So the things that are in place now are so much better. And that's why I go and beat myself up all summer, is trying to ensure that these programs keep getting funding.
It goes back to that kid walking across the pool. You have the mental mindset, the determination. They could teach you whatever position and they know you're going to deliver with excellence, versus, the opposite, where you could put on a suit, but you don't want to put in the work. And that seems to happen quite a lot. And that's why probably, that formula doesn't work. Let's quickly talk about the current position you have as the director at the executive director, at the Michael P. Murphy Museum. Give me a little bit about that for the audience, why you enjoy it, and what the mission there is.
Well, definitely. So I touched base quickly on my audio video company, and I was in that audio video world. And I had another company. I built this indoor golf facility with 15,000 square foot golf facility. So I was doing a lot of different things entrepreneurially, and heard that there was talks that there would be a Navy SEAL museum built on Long Island. So I was born and raised here. Back home now, this is something close, near and dear to my heart. So I'm now actively trying to get involved with the family to try to get, to donate. That's pretty much what I wanted to do. That was my vision. So it took me about 2 years, because there was no storefront, there was no building. It took me about 2 years to actually get face to face with somebody. That was because they had some other person running a few things that wasn't doing a great job. But get in front of the Murphy family. I explained to them I would like to help design the audio, video, alarms, security cameras, all of that stuff, the technology in the museum, use my relationships with my manufacturers to hopefully get donated equipment, all of those things. And that is what I thought would be my part. After meeting the family, about a month or so later, they came to me and said, hey, Chris, would you be willing to be on our board? So I've never been on a board before. So I said, I'd be honored to do that. And they said, we'd love to have a SEAL on board where they could help, see the vision, make sure things are correct, and that stuff. So jumped on board, was on as a board member for a few years as we were building the museum. Once we got to the point where audio video came in, I got all the audio video done. I can run the whole museum from my phone. Everything's to my liking. I think it's great. And we're getting ready to open. And just before we got ready to open, the family came to me and said, hey, would you be interested in running the museum? We can't think of somebody else, you know, that we would like to have.
That's an honor.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm in my 50s now. So I'm sitting here going, I'm running around, running a business, collecting money, dealing with all of this stuff, you know, all of those nuances as an entrepreneur and business owner that, you know, sound great when you're young and new, but, you know, I'm 20 years into running my business. No, well, at that time, it was probably like 18 or 19 years running the business. And I was just getting tired of the
burnt out.
Right. And so I said, you know what, that may be a good shift in, you know, quality of life, right, for me. So I still have my business running, but I wound up taking the position. And I also didn't realize, because I never ran a museum before, didn't realize how therapeutic it would be for me to be a part of this. So to be able to tell the story of all of the guys that have given their life as SEALs from 1944 to present day, you know, it helps me. It affects me daily. Just before the podcast, I did a quick little tour with a homeschool, you know, so like I'm just explaining what UDTs were, what Navy SEALs are, what mindset is, why people need to be extraordinary, why we can't be all the same. All of these kids can't just be the same kid. You have to have people that are, you know, dream big. They have to be extraordinary people, or else the world would be really boring, right? You wouldn't have Elon Musk's out there landing rockets with chopsticks and doing all this other stuff, right? If everybody just thought the same. So me doing that, and, you know, telling the stories of the guys that we no longer have with us, explaining why they sacrificed themselves, explaining Michael's story, explaining the SEAL mindset, and explaining all of these things, you know, wound up having a great impact on me, you know, so
it almost brought you back home and gave you that purpose you talked about.
That absolutely. So now the way I look at it, or how I phrase it, is I'm just serving in a different manner, right? I'm kind of back in, but I'm just, you know, in a different role, you know, so I'm the guy keeping the stories alive. I'm the guy, you know, hopefully inspiring kids or people to, you know, try to be a Navy SEAL, or hopefully, you know, I hate the word try, become a SEAL, you know, and, you know, do that type of stuff. Explain why the military is great. Explain why as country.
I love it. And as we wrap up, Chris, I always ask my guests, if you could go back in time, any moment in your life, and give yourself, like sit your young self down, or younger self, what piece of advice would you give yourself, and why?
I would probably say, wow. So now I'm, you know what it is, I'm preaching to a lot of people, but it would be, it's not that hard. You know, everybody looks at everything as like, oh, that's difficult. Oh my God, I can't do this. And, you know, if you really just put in the effort and put in the work, you know, you will get there at some point, you know. And if I knew that when I was younger, that I could technically do anything I set my mind to, that would have been instrumental to me. You know, it's really not that hard. It's a hard, you know, maybe not a great way of saying it, Simon,
no, I think it's great.
You know,
I think we overthink things so much, and we weigh each other down by overthinking and running these scenarios. So to your point, you know, just do it.
That's it. Just do it. And it's a very, you know, Nike came up with that great saying, right?
This is not sponsored by Nike.
No, but but it's funny because it's just a simple thing. It's really just get off your ass and do it. You know, there's so many times in my life where I've heard my father's voice, and thank God he's still alive, but I've heard his voice, and he gave me the work ethic, he gave me the drive, he gave me all these things. And, looking back on that, as you get older, then you realize what they were saying, and that's what stinks, is that youth, knowledge is wasted, on the people that are older. Youth is where you should have more knowledge, but then you wouldn't do stupid, crazy things, right?
That you wouldn't experience it. Well, it's a give or take.
Right.
There you have it, folks. Chris Wyllie, thank you so much for coming down, joining me today on the Ideal Hour, and giving us your experience as a Navy SEAL, as a leader there, and then obviously someone that's carried the torch and teaching the young generation of what it takes to be a SEAL and why someone should be one. Truly appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this with us.
Well, thank you, Simon. I definitely blessed to be on, and happy holidays, and hope the best for you.
Thank you.